Welcome back to Maverick's Kitchen. Thanksgiving is upon us this year, and I want to personally thank each and every one of you for the support you have shown me and to this channel. Regrettably, many of us will not be able to spend this holiday with our families because we are still sacrificing so much for the health and safety of the world. But that doesn't mean we can't still set a table full of delicious fall specialties. First off, we're going to need to prep a couple of pumpkins. Yep, that looks good to me. I wanted to bring forth some dishes that are different from the Thanksgiving staples while retaining familiarity and flavors, so I've come up with 4 truly unique twists on the standard Thanksgiving fare. As always, our dishes today were inspired by a game. Once again, we're diving into Stardew Valley's expansive world to handpick our veggies and cook our wholesome meals. We're taking a look at quite a few meals this time, including pumpkin soup, made simply with pumpkin and milk, the sage stuffing with hazelnuts, a delicious pumpkin pie, and a specialty drink made from cranberries and apples called Cranberry Candy. Each of these are quite simple on their own, so let's try to elevate them into some show-stopping Thanksgiving dishes. Now, if perfectly karate chopping your pumpkins didn't work, you can start with cutting 2 small sugar pie pumpkins in half and scooping out the seeds and pulp. These pumpkins are then going onto a foil-lined baking sheet before getting brushed all over with a neutral oil. Then we're placing them in an oven preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 degrees Celsius for around 35 minutes until they are fork tender. We're then going to start preparing some additional flavors, starting with a whole large yellow onion, diced up into smallest chunks. The size and evenness here doesn't matter too much because it'll all be blended later on. Alongside the onion, we're going to crush and peel 3 to 4 cloves of garlic. Then start warming up a large pot over medium heat with a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the oil is shimmering, we'll add in all of our onion and cook for 3 to 4 minutes before throwing in our crushed cloves of garlic. Cook for a few more minutes until the onions have softened and the mixture has let off a lot of steam. Now that our pumpkins have cooled down a bit, we can remove the skins with a fork and add them into the pot. We're then vigorously stirring this mixture together, trying to break up the pumpkin as much as possible. To spice things up, we're adding half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a quarter teaspoon of cloves, and around half a teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. Stir everything together for even distribution, and prepare around 4 cups of heated stock. I'm using vegetable broth to keep this recipe vegetarian, but a chicken or turkey stock will work wonderfully. Start pouring in the stock while gently stirring the mixture. You can add more or less here to reach the desired soupiness of your soup. I ended up using just shy of 3 cups of broth since the lack of gelatin in vegetable broth means this soup will end up a little too liquid with the full 4 cups. We're then bringing the pot to a rolling boil and reducing to a simmer for 15 minutes. Once finished, set it aside to cool for a bit. Trust me, pouring large amounts of boiling liquid into a blender is a mistake that you will only make once. Make sure not to fill your blender above its maximum capacity. You may need to blend in 2 batches with a smaller blender. To this, we're adding around half a cup of heavy cream, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, and 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil. You can adjust the amounts of each of these depending on how creamy or sweet you would like your soup, and the olive oil will contribute to the silky smoothness of the finished product. Blend everything together for 2 to 3 minutes until completely smooth before tasting and adding salt and pepper until the soup is absolutely perfect. We're then going to pour ourselves a bowl full and carefully decorate the top before adding an additional grating of fresh nutmeg and a light sprinkle of flaky salt. These toppings really bring this soup to life, so don't skimp out here. And what can I say? This soup is warm and comforting while delivering all of my favorite fall flavors in a super savory, scrumptious soup. This bowl will definitely be featured as my warm-up course as we prepare to dive into our turkey dinner. And speaking of turkey dinner, if there's one thing I can't have turkey without, it's a fantastic stuffing. To take this up a notch, I'm going to be making a ciabatta bread, sage, sausage, and hazelnut stuffing. Now, ciabattas have notoriously crusty bottoms and edges, so I'm starting with removing just enough of each to get to the softer bread within. I thought I would need 3 whole loaves, but 2 of these made more stuffing than I could ever stomach, so I'll be using the third one as a side to be dipped into our pumpkin soup. The other 2 loaves are being cut up into about 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter cubes. The cubes are then being tossed onto a rimmed baking sheet that is going into a low oven at 250 degrees Fahrenheit or 120 degrees Celsius. There's no specific baking time, just check the bread every 10 minutes or so to stir them around until you've got crusty croutons. Then in a large pan, we're going to start preparing all of the flavors that will make this stuffing shine. I'm starting with 1 pound of ground breakfast sausage. Cook the sausage on medium-high heat until no pink remains and the edges start getting a little brown and crispy. Then drain on a paper towel and give your pan a light wipe. Next up, we've got a few vegetables to prepare. Starting with 6 stalks of celery cut into thirds and then diced, alongside a large white onion also diced. Oh, and I almost forgot 2 sprigs of rosemary finely chopped. Now what makes stuffing taste good? That's right, an entire stick of butter. Let that melt and get foamy before adding in our prepared veggies, chopped rosemary, and 3 to 4 cloves of crushed garlic. Since we won't be adding any additional seasoning to our stuffing, now is the time to salt and pepper our vegetables. Then, in a medium pan, we're melting a tablespoon of butter and roasting an entire cup of hazelnuts. Make sure to give them a very chefy flip in the pan, and toast them until they start getting a little color and smell nice and nutty. We're then bringing them out onto a paper towel, covering with another paper towel and rolling them around to remove most of the skins. Don't worry about getting all of the skins off, just anything that's loose. Then roughly chop the nuts. They don't need to be crushed into a powder, but you don't want any full hazelnuts when you're done. Set the hazelnuts aside in a bowl, and we're ready to start the assembly process. Grab the absolute largest bowl in your house, and we've got a lot of stuffing to make. Our ciabatta bread should be totally dried out and crunchy by now. Start by adding it into our bowl, followed by the softened veggies, the sausage, hazelnuts, and 1 sprig of chopped sage. Then grab some wooden spoons and start tossing the mixture like a giant bready, butter-filled salad. Once well mixed, we're bringing in 4 cups of chicken stock. Start drizzling in the stock while mixing until your stuffing is at your desired moistness. Then thoroughly beat 1 egg, drizzle it over the stuffing, and mix it one last time. Grab your largest casserole dish and butter the bottom and sides before dumping in your stuffing. And then realize that your casserole dish isn't large enough, so go grab its little brother to hold the rest of the stuffing. These dishes will now be covered with aluminum foil and placed in an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, then uncovered for an additional 20 minutes until the uppermost layer of stuffing is light brown and crispy. Use your largest spatula to get an absolutely massive amount of stuffing onto your plate and dig in. The bread is both crispy on top and moist underneath, and I cannot imagine making a proper stuffing without the addition of breakfast sausage. The savory flavor of the sage cuts through the sweetness of our cooked vegetables, and the crunchy hazelnuts are the perfect addition to this mixture of textures. This stuffing may clock in at a few hundred calories per serving, but it is well worth going back for seconds. And once you're done with seconds, we're left with everyone's favorite course, dessert. While Thanksgiving just wouldn't be complete without a pumpkin pie, there are 100 recipes out there for the same pumpkin pie that we've had a million times. Instead, I want to bring you a combination pumpkin and apple pie. I was introduced to this creation by my sister-in-law a few years ago, and it quickly found a place in my heart as my absolute favorite pie. Let's start with a simple butter pie crust by combining 300 grams or 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 50 grams or half a cup of granulated sugar, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Pulse these ingredients together before getting your cubed butter directly out of the fridge. This is 2 sticks or 1 cup of butter cut into 1/2-inch cubes. Keep pulsing the ingredients together until the butter is fairly fine and you have a crumbly sand-like mixture. Don't forget to blow away the flour that inexplicably escaped from your food processor. Then prepare a 1/4 cup of ice water to drizzle in while the food processor is running. You can add another tablespoon of water if it's absolutely necessary, but you'll see as we pour our mixture out that even though it looks super crumbly, when we press it together, a dough will form. So we're going to knead this together a few times until it forms a cohesive ball before wrapping it in plastic wrap, forming it into a disc, taking a second to admire the butter marbling in the dough, and letting the dough rest in the fridge for at least 1 hour. Make sure to take the dough out of the fridge about 10 minutes before you're ready to roll it out so it can warm up just a little, and then we're heavily flouring our work surface, rolling pin, and the dough itself. Start rolling the dough out a little at a time, pressing together any cracks that start at the edges, and making sure to flip it occasionally to avoid sticking together. Then continue rolling until you have a circle about 3 inches larger than your pie dish. Pick up the dough using your rolling pin and drape it over our pie pan. Avoid stretching the dough by pushing it into the corners. Instead, lift and press down on the edges of the dough. Any stretching here will result in the crust shrinking in the oven. Then using a paring knife, I'm trimming the edges of the crust to a 1-inch overhang and forming the crust by pinching the overhang between my fingers. We're going to chill this dough in the fridge, but first I'm lining it with parchment paper and an aluminum foil bowl filled with my pie weights. Preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 degrees Celsius while the crust is in the fridge for at least 15 to 30 minutes, and transfer the crust directly from the fridge into the oven. Par bake the crust for 15 minutes before removing the pie weights, docking the bottom, and cooking an additional 10 minutes. While the crust bakes, we can start on our fillings. We're essentially making partial recipes of both pumpkin and apple pie filling, so let's start with a can of pumpkin placed into a medium saucepan. We're warming up all of our fillings because a cold pie filling will certainly crack in the oven. Add to our pumpkin 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 of a cup packed brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of ginger, 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, and 1/4 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. Now take a big whiff of that mixture because there is nothing in this world that smells better. Whisk everything together over medium heat until well combined. On the side, we're beating together 3 large room temperature eggs and getting ready a cup of heavy cream mixed with 1/2 cup of milk that's been warmed up. The reason we heated up the cream mixture is to temper our eggs, which we'll do by slowly pouring the cream into them while whisking constantly. Once you've added about half of the cream mixture, you can pour the rest in and then transfer the whole mixture into our saucepan. Make sure to mix until everything is completely combined before setting aside so we can start on our apple pie filling. This will begin with 2 medium apples. I'm using Honeycrisp, but you can use your favorite pie appropriate apples. I'm skinning and coring both of these apples before cutting into 1/4-inch slices, which are then going into a medium-sized saucepan over medium heat, along with a 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar. Next in is a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, and a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. Melt in 2 tablespoons of butter and let the apple filling cook for 5 to 6 minutes until the apples are nice and soft. And we're finally ready to assemble our pie. Starting with our perfectly par-baked crust that's still quite warm, we can brush the edges down with an egg wash consisting of 1 egg and a tablespoon of heavy cream. Do this before adding in the filling so we don't mess up the surface of the pumpkin puree once poured. The bottom layer of this pie consists of our apple slices, so those are going in first. Make sure all the liquid goes in with them. This is going to caramelize on the bottom, which will be absolutely delicious. Try to get the apples laying as flat as possible. We don't want any of them sticking up above the level of the pumpkin filling. Then gently pour in the pumpkin filling until the crust reaches maximum capacity, and use a toothpick to pop any bubbles and push down any floating apple slices. I'm immediately tinting the edges of my crust since they are nice and golden brown and I want them to stay that way, but you can remove the foil near the end of baking if your crust could use a bit more color. This pie is then going into an oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius for 45 to 55 minutes until completely cooked with a little wobble left in the center. Then let the pie cool off in the oven with the door cracked for at least 30 minutes. I know you want to dig in right away. You might not even be able to stop yourself from taking a few crumbs off the crust, but this pie needs to sit for at least 4 hours up to overnight before it's ready to cut into. The bright side of waiting is pumpkin pie for breakfast. Carefully cut the perfect slice and top with a big dollop of whipped cream before digging in. And this pie is absolute perfection. The combination of pumpkin and apple makes for an entirely new experience while keeping all of your favorite Thanksgiving flavors. If anything, I'm thinking of skipping Thanksgiving dinner this year and just eating an entire one of these pies by myself. This slice certainly didn't last long as I ate every single crumb. But wait, we're not done yet. One last thing to make as an after dinner drink is Stardew Valley's Cranberry Candy. This cocktail is a mixture of cranberries and apples, so I'm starting with Laird's Straight Apple Brandy. In a shaker, combine 2 ounces of apple brandy, about half an ounce of simple syrup, and 1 ounce of cranberry juice. Shake well and strain into a highball glass before topping off with club soda. Then to garnish, we're adding a thin slice of apple and a skewer full of fresh cranberries. This drink is an absolute delight and tastes like candy made from cranberries. It felt super festive and will definitely be featured at my Thanksgiving dinner. Before we go, I just wanted to say again how thankful I am for everyone who has supported the creation of this channel in the last few months. And I am of course very thankful for Pesto here, who keeps me company while cooking and editing. I hope that all of you have a few new dishes to try this Thanksgiving, and if you do, make sure to let me know in the comments below or by coming by my Twitch stream. Make sure to like and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed watching, and check out my Instagram in the link below for even more dishes that I will be preparing this Thanksgiving. I stream live on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, Thanksgiving excluded, and I hope to see some of you over there.